buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Aureliano Santiago y a la vez soy coordinador de los vendedores de aquí del Alvarado. Cómo llegué a ser vendedor es la pura necesidad de la vida. Yo llegué aquí en el 88, me puse a trabajar, pero realmente nosotros cuando recién llegamos aquí en este país es completamente diferente de donde vengamos, de donde venimos. Entonces, principalmente topamos con la realidad en el idioma. No entendemos a nadie. Entonces, ¿cómo queremos buscar trabajo si no entendemos? Entonces, tenemos que ir buscando nosotros, y eso es lo que me pasó a mí, ir buscando poco a poco, hasta que por fin encontré un trabajo de 3 días por semana, 5 días y hasta ahí. Y yo realmente con ese dinero no me alcanzaba para solventar mis gastos. Mantener a mi familia, pagar biles, pagar pues realmente todo lo que en realidad se tiene que pagar aquí en este país, porque si no pagas algo, te descontinúan en ese sistema. Entonces, yo me puse a vender.
Bueno, mi nombre completo es Merlin Alvarado, soy de Honduras, tengo 15 años viviendo en este país y empecé hace aproximadamente unos 13 años a vender por la misma necesidad del trabajo, porque el trabajo para las personas indocumentadas es muy escaso, entonces eso nos orilla a emprender, aunque tengamos miedo a emprenderlo.
Bueno, básicamente yo empecé lo que es en el 2018, la venta de comida. Mi especialidad es lo que es tacos, quesadillas, burritos, lo que es comida mexicana. Y pues yo he vendido lo que es en área de Reseda y Northridge, son las 2 ciudades donde yo he estado vendiendo. La decisión de venta ambulante, me imagino que cada quien tiene sus inicios diferentes, de una decisión diferente. Como en mi caso, la decisión fue porque pues uno está acostumbrado a trabajar en compañías, en otros tipos de trabajos como empleados. Y esto nace cuando a veces estás presionado en un empleo y pues quieres buscar la manera de ser independiente, ¿va? Y otra de las maneras es de que dices, no me alcanza lo que gano en un empleo, entonces a lo mejor ya poniendo mi propio negocio pues puedo ganar un poquito más y ahorrar un poquito más de dinero.
Pues básicamente así empiezo mi día. Me levanto temprano, voy a comprar todo mi material. Vengo aquí, como la salsa, el pico de gallo, y eso lo traigo previamente preparado en mi casa. Y lo demás vengo y preparo acá. Y tardo aproximadamente entre 30 y 45 minutos en que ya esté listo todo para empezar a vender.
Cuando yo empecé a vender en este MacArthur, habíamos como 8 vendedores. Estoy hablando en 1992. Habíamos 8 vendedores. Éramos muy felices porque la policía no nos molestaba, ¿no? Pasaba la policía y nos decían adiós. Cuando menos nos dimos cuenta, ya éramos bastantes. En esa esquina de las 7, aquí, ya habíamos como 15. Entonces, esto ya fue creciendo. Y así sucesivamente, hasta hoy en día, sigo estando acá.
Hi, I'm Rita Gonzalez. I'm a curator at LACMA, and I'm here with Ruben Ochoa. Ruben, thank you so much for being here and for talking about the project that you've done for SNAP LACMA. And I wanted to just use this kind of opportunity to talk a little bit about this project as it kind of fits across the trajectory of your own life experience and your own experience as an artist, and even the site where this is located, kind of taking you back to your art school days at Otis. And since it's a really interesting kind of collapsing with Snap, this kind of potential to collapse spaces and to kind of create or map, animate or map onto the cityscape, your own projections and your own kind of mission about cultural production and people who give back to the city, the street vendors who give back to the city. So I think what if you could just talk a little bit about maybe how your biography in some ways encapsulated in a really interesting way in this project. I just thought that in a way, because we're kind of thinking retrospectively, we're thinking about your trajectory as an artist. We're thinking about site, Los Angeles, MacArthur Park. We're thinking about you going back to Otis in a way, the site of former site of Otis.
Right.
And so, yeah, the question was really about how this really it documents in a certain way a longstanding interests that have been a part of your work, and not only your work, but where your work kind of maps with your life experience and your family history.
Yeah, I mean, it completely touches upon, I mean, just my upbringing, just growing up, from, I talk about it a lot, selling tortillas, from my mom pioneering the whole tortilla route. But I think one thing I recall is, like, as we would sell tortillas in North County, we would encounter paleteros or other vendedores throughout the streets, in at least in Carlsbad and Vista. And I remember the camaraderie between my family, like even my uncle. Like one time, we saw this guy selling camarones, and it was like my deal was like, "Is this your first day of the job?" Like he had botas, he was walking with the cooler
Mhm.
all day, and he was just like, "You're gonna need some tennies, pacaduras, so you can last longer, because this is, it's a long day to like just go out there and try to hustle, selling shrimp in boots." And he had the whole decor of he had the sombrero and everything, but his cowboy hat and his botas. But my tío was just like, "No, man, you gotta like adjust with the climate, with the situation." So see that camaraderie, like him offering suggestions and helping and working with other families and other families to sell tortillas, and even to huevos, the family that will sell huevos, and
Mhm.
that connection. That when I came to Otis, when I chose to go to Otis, a big part of it was because of the location, all the energy, all um, everything that was happening. Such like the fabric of the city was just bustling right there, with all these the vendedoras, the swap meet, um, the primary Central American, Mexican. Every corner was like a different region, and coming across that one, I'd have to go to the hardware store or go get food, walk to another street, go to Chapienda bakery just around the corner, and then encountering the vendedores and befriending them, talking to them, and trying to convince them for me to document them. Because even as a student, approaching them and saying, "I want to draw or paint you or photograph you," they're like, "Who's this documenting us? Who's photographing us?" And building up that relationship with them. And I befriended one paletero, and he once I photographed him, taking a black and white photo class, showed him the pictures. I mean, also trying to capture my eye, so the images weren't that great. But once I did a painting of it, and then they hung it in the hallway at the former Otis campus, and I brought him in. Like he left his card outside, and I brought him in. He was just like in awe. And then afterwards, he just introduced me to every vendor, like from the lady with the stroller selling sodas from the stroller to the tamalero, to the even the guy selling Micas Seguros IDs, and pretty much was like, "Déjalo que toma foto, te va a pintar, te va a hacer una obra de arte." And he was just like, introducing me to, it was like this whole network, and which was pretty amazing. So when I was, that practice always stayed with me, with my subjectivity and that labor, that workforce. It just changed over time. Touch upon how my identity's been built, or how identities are built by built environment, and thinking of how we can deconstruct these spaces, how they're built and deconstructed. But it's always been there. Being an artist of color is, a political act. Being an artist is a political act. Being an artist of color in a white cube is a political act. So my work in the early '90s had a lot of activism, going out with organizations, marching. I think from there it transitioned to like, how do I deconstruct these spaces within into the gallery space, the museum space.
Exactly. I mean, there was a lot of intervening, and it became more at a certain point. I feel like about engineering and intervening within the architectural space, which was really about questioning the white cube. Questioning the authority and the dominance of the white cube.
Right.
And I mean, that even really goes back to Class C, where you had a mobilizing a gallery, taking it on the road, having it be nomadic, having it being responsive to different neighborhoods, having it being, hours that are more friendly for people who work during the day, all of those things you were thinking through. And then sculpturally, you would continue to think through where you actually kind of exposing rebar, or exposing the kind of inner workings of the building, and therefore exposing the labor, the sort of that's made invisible by that plastering over and covering up and painting over, something that's like a neutral white cube.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, touching upon, definitely exposing the labor, the invisible labor. It's always been an aspect of the work. And, part of it, it's also like not aware you're doing that, like, making the work, you're drawn to this, you're drawn to these materials, not fully understanding why one's drawn to it. Like, rust, I mean, my mom did the tortillas, and then part of her action was to I mean, she didn't want to live in the rancho, so she pushed my dad to construction, and he ended up doing construction and concrete. And so his truck would always have all these amazing tools, and they'd always be rusting because of the concrete.
Right.
And so seeing that rust was always like a palette in my mind, like it was always there. And so when I started working with rust, putting it on paper, I was like, oh, there was something very familiar, like this inherent history of it. And from my dad's engagement to the material and concrete to just the inherent history of rust as a pigment from on specific sides of town, where on one side of town it could you can see it in a nice restaurant, it becomes like a nice patina, it becomes very like somewhat like I don't want to say the word not exotic, it becomes very like beautified, but in other areas it's what you live with, what you contend with, it's just there, it's something that you don't want it to grow, it happens. And so to I lost my train of thought, but I'll dealing with that material in a way. Oh man, I forgot what I was gonna say. Playing with that material is essentially where I was again just trying to. I totally lost, forgot. Sorry, got distracted. Paint, pigment, rust. Um, yeah, I think when you go to the museum, the last thing you want to do is have things that are rusted and deteriorating. And for me, it was like how to bring that into the space
Mhm.
but also how to engineer it where it's not just going to fall apart, where it's still going to be structurally sound, and that also is kind of pointing to the invisible aspects of it too.
Well, I
Ignorant,
think that's, that's been a tension in your work too, where you even created constructions that were meant to be just in situ. There were almost, performative sculptures, right? So a
right?
sculpture that is not meant to be, um, suspended uh, permanently, but is a kind of temporary, like foraging of found materials and constructing of a form. And there's an interesting way that connects with what you're doing for this project too, because you're kind of taking everyday objects, these vendor carts or other forms of selling uh, wares on the street, and you've turned them into, like, temporary sculptures, kinetic sculptures or temporary um, portable monuments. I don't know if you see that kind of did you see that connection, or did you like feel that connection with the earlier work that you'd done that was more kind of performative with the sculptures?
I did, and I think I mean most people know my work from 2000, from either Class C or
Mhm.
from when I did Extracted and large leaning wall, um, and that whole period of making these large intervention sculpture works, putting wallpaper in the freeway. But a lot of people haven't seen my earlier works where I was either really directly dealing with my family as
Mhm.
tortilleros,
Mhm.
as vendedores. And I started to revisit that in these past years, just as you're looking at your work, and especially as being called to do public art and um, getting awarded some public art commissions. It's like, how do you address the public? Because the last thing I want to present is such a distressed reality. Like it could be so distressing already. I don't want to mimic that. In a gallery space and museum space, I could bring that in because it's supposed to be this neutral space, but at least there's that conversation, bringing this thing in. What does it mean to bring these materials in? What does it mean to implicate the space and the museum and this contentious white cube? But in the public, I still want to address the public, and in a way, when I used to do murals, it was always with the social message, trying to address what was present, what was happening at that moment, and
Mhm.
it was also about the pain and the discontent that we're addressing in the 90s. Well, again, same issues: police brutality, immigration, government Pete Wilson's English only,
Mhm.
uh, gang violence. Those are things I was addressing in murals and in earlier works. But for now, when I want to address public art, I could bring that reality in, and people live it. Especially as I did my piece for San Isidro, um, I kind of want to make work that makes people happy as well. I feel like art has the facet to do so many things, has the power to create change, and impact viewers. How can I insert something with a serious message and still be somewhat uplifting and because I like to joke around, I like to have humor, I like to add absurdity. How can I bring in those things? It's all part of me, and so I really want to create these vendedores, like this whole magical realist experience, whimsical experience of el lotero volador flying around. I wanted to have this palatero cart coming with ice creams popping out,
Mhm.
these floating down, Mary popping like fruteros, and bucket of flowers just imploding, like as you would see the city, like it's sprinkled everywhere. I deal with a lot of inanimate objects because they have these inherent histories in them, and I really wanted to capture that.